Our weekly thought of the day is gratitude. One of the very simple things you can do to feel better when you're at home is to just reflect on the things that are actually working in your life. There's a lot of news and stories about things that aren't working. But if we pay close attention, we can see a lot of things are working. Our bodies might be working. People might love us. So it might be a good idea each night to just jot down a couple ideas and sort of a gratitude journal. And there's science that says that this will make you feel better. So gratitude is the way to go. We are joined today by a very special guest. His name is Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn. He is a true pioneer in the world of mindfulness. He founded something called mindfulness-based stress reduction back in the 1970s. He's credited for integrating mindfulness into education, healthcare, and society. And he is the author of many, many books. One of them, a classic, is called Full Catastrophe Living. And no, he's not a psychic. But before all of that, he was kicking around the mean streets of Manhattan just like you guys. Welcome to the show, Jon Kabat-Zinn. It is an honor to have you today.
It's my pleasure, Brian, really.
So I know you're going to be walking us through some mindfulness, but before we do that, is there any kind of brief bullet points, anything you want to say about yourself or anything you'd like to address?
Well, just that my heart bleeds for New York City, where I was born, and since it somehow became the epicenter of the corona pandemic, and we got to see every day and still continuing the enormous pain and suffering in the aftermath of the epidemic, and the people losing their relatives or their own lives, and the people on the front lines, whether they're the sort of food deliverers or the police or the janitors in the hospitals or the frontline hospital workers, the physicians and nurses and everybody. And I guess the banging of the pots every evening, to salute all the frontline workers. I mean, we're seeing some of the best of New York City come out under the absolute most horrible, almost inconceivable, unimaginable conditions. And then, of course, there's everybody else, who's stuck at home and can't work in many cases, no income, lost jobs. I mean, the levels of stress in this society at the moment are really something that we have not seen in 100 years, since the last pandemic. And even then, probably it didn't hit in the economy in the way that it's hitting now, because the economy is so much more complex. So it's a very, very difficult time. And I just want to honor the fact that we also have this way of relating that wasn't at all available to us when I was a child, or in 1918 when the flu pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic hit, because we can actually be I'm in Massachusetts. You guys are in different places in New York. Other people are going to be watching this from God knows where, everybody from their own safe, secure space. But we can actually be in the same place at the same time through this technology. And that's totally amazing. And imagine if this technology had not been invented and we're in the middle of this pandemic. We would not be able to connect. And the most important thing about mindfulness, if we're going to be talking about mindfulness as meditation or as a way of being and a way of life, which is what it is to me, the most important thing about mindfulness is that it's about being true to yourself. It's about being who you really are. And no one knows who you really are, except possibly you. And no one can be as close to who you really are as you if you're willing to make friends with the totality of yourself, including the stuff that you may have a hard time with. And when we do that, it turns out, and again, as Brian said, a lot of heavy-duty science supports this, that it has profound effects on all sorts of levels of our life expression, from the body and our genes and chromosomes and brain structure and function, and even cellular aging to our psychology and our interactions with other people. So there's a huge amount of value in connecting with yourself in a deep way, and especially under extremely stressful conditions. So Brian mentioned that my first book was called Full Catastrophe Living. And, you know, people used to say, well, what do you mean full catastrophe? What the hell is the full catastrophe? And it's actually from a movie called Zorba the Greek. It's a quotation from Zorba the Greek, this movie starring a fellow named Anthony Quinn. But I always felt like New Yorkers got what the full catastrophe is, but now the rest of the world is getting to understand the full catastrophe of the human condition. It doesn't mean that everything's bad. It means it's good, bad, and ugly all rolled up into one at one time. And then how are we going to relate to that so that we don't get caught by the ugly, destroyed by the bad, or forget what's good? So I really appreciated, Brian, how you started out with just remembering, at least kind of bringing to mind for ourselves, at least one thing that we can be grateful for and thankful for, and express gratitude for it, even though things may be falling apart in your life and in the city and in the world. And from the bottom, it certainly looks like, you know, we're being swept away in ways that are destroying everything we felt was secure about our lives.
So with all of this scientific-based mindfulness, can you lead us through a little practice of mindfulness so we can ground ourselves in this present moment?
I'd be happy to. And what would you say, maximum 10 minutes? Would that be good? Or you tell
Sure,
me?
that sounds great.
Okay. So the first thing, I'll say a little preamble to this, and that is, it's not about time. And it's not about pretending to be a certain way or even getting calm. It's what I was pointing to at the very beginning. It's just being yourself. And it turns out that that's like amazing. And you were saying about gratitude, like how many things still work or how many things are good in your life. Well, one thing that still works is that, you know, although the pandemic targets breathing, when it's the virus, when it's at its worst and killing people, it gets into your airway and your lungs and it just destroys it. So at this particular moment in time, if you're breathing, that's a bloody miracle. And it is one of the things that is not just good about you, it's like completely right about you. And we take it totally for granted unless we're choking on a piece of food or, you know, sort of underwater, somebody's playing with us and keeping our head down underwater or something like that. You get very interested in the next in-breath almost immediately. That's the only thing that you'll care about after a certain very short period of time, because the breath is so fundamental to our life. But when we're just zoning along in our daily lives, we never ever think about the breath. And I'm not asking you to think about it. I'm asking you to feel it. So see if you can position yourself in a way that feels comfortable to you, either gazing at the screen or with your eyes closed. Any posture whatsoever is fine. But sometimes it's helpful to sit in a posture that I describe as embodying dignity, embodying the beauty that you already are. That your mother or father, you know, that people were happy when you were born, you know, because you came out so beautiful. You're at least that beautiful now. And then just feeling your breath. I'm not asking you to think about your breath. Please understand this. I'm asking you to just feel the breath moving in and out of your body. And just because all of a sudden we're paying attention to the breath doesn't mean that you should start manipulating your breath or try to improve on it by, say, breathing in more deeply or breathing out more deeply. No, let the body take care of breathing, because it does it while you're asleep. It does it while you're awake. It does it whether you're remembering that you're breathing or not. It's like your ally in life. And so seeing if you can ride on the waves of your own breath sensations in the body, as if you were floating in a little rubber raft or dinghy, you know, on a lake or on the ocean, and the waves were just gently lifting you up and gently dropping you down. And you're just feeling the in-breath for its full duration. And then it switches. There's a pause for a moment, and then the out-breath. And you're simply riding or surfing with full attention on this breath coming in, this breath going out. And for the moment, you're not trying to get anywhere or feel anything. You're just allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling as you rest here. Focusing on your belly or your nostrils or your chest or wherever the breath sensations are most vivid for you in the body at this moment. And then you just stay here. Paying attention. Opening your heart to yourself. You're not trying to shut out any thoughts. You're not trying to control your thoughts. But you are trying to, as best you can, just focus on the sensations in the body. And this breath coming in. And this breath releasing. And resting as best you can in this moment that we call now, which has a very interesting property to it that you can discover, and I'm sure all of you already have. But it's that if you really live inside the present moment or live your way into the present moment, this moment we call now is timeless. You're just here. It's just now. But there's no place to go. There's nothing to do. There's no special something that you have to get. And you're already 100% okay, who and as you are. Including all those thoughts that you may have about how inadequate you are in certain ways, or what the names other people call you, or anything like that. You're so whole, so together, so yourself, that none of those things really matter at all. They're just waves on the surface of a vast ocean of awareness that takes the form of who you really are. And so it's the same for all of us, and it's uniquely different for all of us because each one of us is uniquely different. Just the way every breath is uniquely different. No two breaths are ever the same. No two people are the same, even identical twins. No two mountains are the same. But wherever you go, wherever you are is called here. And this is a place where you could call home. Home plate, home base. A place where you can actually take shelter, take refuge, since we're all on this refuge sheltering, condition, to be really at home in your body, in your heart, in your mind, and in this present moment. And if the mind goes crazy and starts thinking about this and that and is not paying attention, you forget entirely that there's any breathing going on. That's part of the curriculum too. In fact, a very important part of the curriculum. Because then you get to notice, oh, I told my mind to pay attention to my belly and the ballooning out of the belly on the in-breath and the out-breath, or wherever you're feeling it. And then my mind has a life of its own. It's not going to listen to me. It's just going to go off. So then there's me, and then there's my mind. What's going on here? Who am I? Am I my thoughts? I'm not the breather. I mean, if it were up to me to be breathing, I would have died a long time ago. You know, just forgot, got distracted, got a text, forget, oops. So who are you? Maybe your true nature, more than anything else, and for all of us, is awareness itself. Is that unique quality of being that is awake, that knows, not just by thinking, but by direct perceiving. And in that sense, you know yourself without having to write a story about it. You know yourself far better than anybody in the world, including your parents. And the more you attend to your breath in this way, the more you cultivate moment-to-moment non-judgmental awareness or mindfulness, the more you live your way into the fullness of your own possibilities. And I've met thousands of people who came to this when they were kids and completely transformed the arc of their entire life. Because they had a kind of rudder or steering wheel to navigate the ups and downs and the challenges that get thrown at us by life. Many of them that we didn't ask for and that we didn't want. And to move into wise relationship to them so that they not only don't harm us, but that we can make use of those energies and even at times the toxicity and the danger to actually grow wiser, more intentional, more connected with who we really, 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 really are. And what's ours to do in life as we grow older and older, you know, and going through school and everything. It's like, what is my, you know, what is the adventure of my life? So that I wind up living my adventure, not somebody else's adventure. And of course, that's a lifetime's engagement. But the more you are in touch with yourself and ask those kinds of questions, like who's breathing, who's sitting, who's thinking, who's scared, the more you're cultivating access to your own awareness, and then you can investigate, is your awareness scared? Is your awareness stressed? Is your awareness attached to some story or other about the world? And this gives you a whole new degree of freedom in which to navigate the ups and downs of life. I have a friend named George Mumford, who maybe you've heard of, who wrote a book called The Mindful Athlete. And George trained Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and the Chicago Bulls in 3 of their championship seasons. And then trained the Los Angeles Lakers and Kobe Bryant before he died so tragically with his daughter. And the Steve Kerr, who was on that Chicago Bulls, those championship teams. Steve Kerr is now the coach of the Golden State Warriors. And mindfulness is absolutely fundamental to their entire training program and their ethic, their way of understanding what sport and sports personship is all about. Mindfulness is at the absolute core of it. LeBron James meditates. I mean, it's just like you wouldn't believe how widespread this is becoming. And it looks so much like nothing from the outside. Because it's a non-doing. It's learning how to actually be as a human being in the only moments we're ever alive. And when you do that, when you engage in that way, then it turns out that it may look a lot like nothing, but it turns out to be just about everything. Because everything depends on our embodied awareness. And then out of embodied awareness and silence and stillness can come all sorts of actions. On the basketball court, in the laboratory, in the schoolroom, on the playground, every place. And most importantly, in your own life. You don't have to go anywhere because you're always already here. And if you're not your best friend, then you're really missing a kind of love that has nothing to do with ego or building yourself up or telling yourself stories. It has to do with understanding the value of life and how much good you can do when you align yourself with your deepest intentions and your own beauty. So before we close, just to say that you can do this on the subway. Whenever you get back into the subway, you can do this anywhere. You can do this at the kitchen table. Nobody needs to even know because you don't have to close your eyes. You can just be aware of like the kitchen table and who's around it and what the conversation is or isn't and how you're feeling. And with your brothers or sisters or mother or father or whatever. And when everybody else is stressed and when everybody else and all of us in some sense are at risk for losing our minds because we can't work and there's no money. And I mean, there's like insane amount of stuff that is driving us crazy. At the same time, this is not a time to lose our minds when we most need them, or to lose our sense of open-heartedness and caring for others when we most need that. And so this practice really isn't about sitting like a statue or breathing. It's about being yourself, as I started out saying, in ways that nurture who you really are in the deepest of ways, moment by moment by moment, because you only have moments to live. We only have moments to live. And the more of them we live inside of and are aware of, the more we can actually do good in the world, do good for ourselves, and take care of what needs taking care of. If people had told me 65 years ago in New York City that I would be spending my life devoted to meditation and bringing it into medicine and science, I would have said, you're effing out of your mind. And yet it came to be, and there's no way to explain it, because there's no way to explain what some traditions call karma. And now that's becoming kind of a mainstream American word. So it's really interesting to ask yourself what your karma is, what your true direction in life might be, what you love so much you paid to do it, and see, and in the meanwhile you just get paid doing whatever it is that you can do. But you never lose sight of the fact that maybe there's something that only you can do on the planet. No one else is going to be able to do it. And if you love it enough and you find a way to do it, the whole planet's going to benefit. And believe me, at this moment in time, the planet needs your generation like nobody's business, because the older people have screwed it up so badly that we really need kind of a fresh imagination and new energy to find a way to live, that when the pandemic is way behind us in the rearview mirror, we got other things in front of us that we really need taken care of. And your generation, those people, you know, in your classes and in your school and in all the other schools in the city, both in grades above you and below you, that's where the future of the world lives. And so let whatever this meditation means to you, let it be a kind of love affair with what's deepest and best and most beautiful in yourself and in life. And I won't ring any bells. You notice I didn't ring any bells to start. I have bells here, and I sometimes use them. You know, I could ring them now, you know, to just show you that I have bells. But I'm not ringing any bells because there's no end to this meditation practice. Life is the real meditation practice. And so the conversation we're going to get into, the questions, everything, and you're working with your teacher, Brian Simmons. I mean, this is all part of the one great curriculum of what it means to be human. And school is a very important part of it, but it's only the kind of launching platform. It's like Cape Kennedy of your life. It's good to have a stable platform to launch out of, but basically, you'll carry it with you your entire life.
Thank you so much for that. Jon, thank you so much for that. That was a very grounding for me. What I'd like to do is I'd like to share with you, you being a scientist and all, I'd like to share with you some data that we've extracted from the students themselves. Because what I've learned over the past many years, but even more so over the past month and a half, is there's a lot of untapped wisdom in the students, as you were pointing towards. So rather than sometimes I try to give them skills, sometimes I try to receive skills from them.
Right, of course.
So we asked them, what are you most worried about in COVID? Right? So 38.5% said, my friends or family getting sick. 23.1% said, I'm worried about too many things to even keep track of. 15.4%, I'm afraid schools will not open for a long time. Another 15.5% said, I'm worried I won't see my friends for a long time. 7.7% were really afraid about getting sick themselves. We asked which of the following situations is most impacting you right now. 46.2% said family stress. 31% said financial stress. It's a lot. 15.4% said anxiety and fear. 8% said the health of a loved one. So what has been very rich each week is to tap into the pool of wisdom in our student body and say, hey guys, what is working for you? So our theme today is pandemic lessons, living your life as if it really mattered in the only moment we ever have. So I asked them, what are some lessons you've learned about yourself, people, or life during this pandemic? And here's a sampling of what I received back from them. I learned I'm a smart person. Rely on yourself. I should save money when I start working again. You only get where you want to be by pushing yourself. Be kind to one another. We're all going through the same thing. Never be too scared to take advantage of opportunities. Don't take life for granted. People should start listening and stop inferring. The things we own are not that important. I tend to overthink the littlest of situations. I like to be alone. I learned that the mind has a lot of information. Someone said ignorance is bliss. I think you might have a comment on that, but okay. Ignorance is bliss. Someone said Bill Gates could have stopped the virus. And my personal favorite, someone said life has a mind of its own. So this is the field that we're in. This is the real, this is what we're speaking to. So we have two students with us. We have Dakota and Tariq, who we will introduce in a moment. Just quickly, is there any reaction you have to that data that we pulled from our students?
On my part?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it just underscores what I was suggesting in that there's so much wisdom.
Yeah.
There's so much wisdom and clarity in young people, which is often not that recognized, and often, even if I'm just thinking back to myself, I never felt like I was smart. I never felt like I really was on top of things. I always felt, like the answers were somewhere else.
Jon, I have to interrupt that though, because we have kids watching right now. You were an MIT trained molecular biologist. How could you look us in the face and say you didn't feel smart? How's that possible?
Yeah, well, because, you walk into a room at MIT and everybody's smarter than you, or you feel that way. And it's the point is that what was said by one of your students is right. You discover that, smart's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you're okay being who you are. And it turns out that's smart. So if you know that, that's smarter than smart. And that actually opens a lot of doors for discovering what you really love, what you're really good at, what you really want to do, or how you really want to be as you grow older. But, everything that was said in your little survey there of what people are really feeling at the moment is so true. And I guess the message of mindfulness is hold all that respectfully with awareness and don't try to do anything with it. Because as soon as you get into doing, you get into trying to fix or solve problems and stuff like that. But very often these problems, at the moment, we have to let things unfold. There's a certain way in which we cannot control the whole world because we're going through this thing that nobody's really in control of.
Well, speaking of unfolding and speaking of being smart, we have a smart senior with us named Dakota. So unmute yourself, Dakota. Dakota is about to graduate right now, and she is one of our leaders, and she is in this unfortunate position of facing a high school graduation in isolation.
Yeah, it has to be virtual.
So Dakota, go ahead.
So
Hi.
hello. Yeah, so I'm a senior. Like I said, I live in the Bronx. A question that I have for you is that being that myself and many other students did not get to finish our senior year, how do we transition to college from an epidemic like this, like being stuck in the coronavirus? Yeah.
Yeah, the answer to that is I don't know. I mean, the universities are all closed down. The colleges are all closed down. The people, this is like, nothing like this has happened before in my lifetime or in, 100 years at least. So it's all brand new. Like, how do you graduate from high school without actually having a graduation ceremony? And I think, the answer is you do the best you can. So there's probably going to be a virtual graduation. And then sometime maybe when the virus is over, we'll have a real graduation, And this is true like in medical school. Like there was no medical school graduation. People just stopped being medical students and went and fought the coronavirus in the hospitals the next day, even before they were supposed to graduate. So you're kind of like, and all of us are kind of in completely new territory. Nobody's written the book about how any of this is going to unfold. And so to a large extent, that's terrifying, but there's also a very positive aspect to it. And that is that, first of all, you're not in it alone. Nobody's graduating. Nobody's going to a graduation ceremony. Nobody's having dances or celebrations or anything like that, at least now. But you will graduate from high school. And the most important person to know that is you, because you graduate yourself from high school. To tell you the truth, I mean, if we're really in full disclosure here, I never graduated from high school. I do not have a high school diploma. I just sort of skipped my senior year for reasons we don't have to go into. But I just didn't want to go back to the senior year, and I wound up going to college.
But just to be clear, you were a student in the Department of Education, though, in New York City. That's correct, right, Jon?
Well, yeah. The thing was, up through the 10th grade, I was a student. I was at Stuyvesant High School, for 1 year. And before that, Junior High School 115 up in Washington Heights, and, which was a very heavy duty place. And I loved it. I mean, it was the best couple of years of my life at the time. So what I'm saying to you, Dakota, is that you're getting, in some sense, an education that, the old people they don't have any answers. Nobody has any answers. So you've got the young brain, you've got the young body, you've got the young power to sort of learn the lessons of reality, but at the same time transform the reality, because you're you and you're part of that reality. So that's a very open field. And I have a feeling that, that it's all going to ultimately work out, and that sounds so silly to say, but I remember, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Shakespeare in Love. Did you ever see that movie? It's a totally phenomenal movie. You should see it at some point. And I remember from it, and I went and Googled it the other day, a kind of dialogue from Shakespeare in Love, where they're trying to put on a play, a Shakespearean play. Shakespeare himself in 1600 in England, trying to put on a play. But they never have enough money, and the police are always hassling them, and there's one problem after another. And then they also are having pandemics. I mean, they're having pandemics, and they didn't understand viruses or bacteria or anything. And then the Black Plague killed like a quarter of the population of Europe. So humanity has seen this many times before. So this is the dialogue. Explain to me about the theater business. Let me explain something to you about the theater business. The natural condition is one of insurmountable obstacles on the road to imminent disaster. That's kind of like the way life is in a certain way. Insurmountable obstacles on the road to imminent disaster. So what do we do? The other person says, and this theater guy says, nothing. Strangely enough, it all turns out well. That's what I'm saying to you in your life. There's no way you can figure it out, but strangely enough, it all turns out well. And then he says, well, how? And the theater guy says, I don't know. It's a mystery. You should rent the movie Shakespeare in Love and just to see if it speaks to you. But we don't know where creativity comes from. We don't know where healing comes from. We don't know where health comes from. We don't know why sometimes when the proverbial stuff is hitting the proverbial fan, some people rise to the occasion and really take charge, and other people run away. So, you've got a whole universe of possibilities out there. And the one thing I would say is try to keep that in mind at the lowest points when, of course, like everybody else, we get depressed, we get anxious, we get frightened, and then we contract in our bodies and in our minds. And that's where the mindfulness really comes in. It's like your awareness knows that you're contracted. You check and see if your awareness is contracted. It will not be. So that's a place where you can stand.
Jon, I want to jump into this because the reason rituals exist, and I know you were a fan years back of Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth, and there are rituals that are actually psychological markers, rites of passage. So psychologically, you prepare from one stage of life to another. A high school graduation, a prom, they all serve this purpose. These kids are being denied that. So to tap into this potential of their youth that you say really involves reframing the situation and looking at it and saying, hey, we get to decide how we come out the other end of this. So when they're 90 years old, they're going to look back and say, hey, we were the generation that had to go through, we're the ones, we did this. And this is that kind of framing of the issue can really galvanize someone's motivation. Is that correct?
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I don't think we're being romantic here. We're saying that you have a lot of power to make decisions in your own life, even in the face of, I'll say it, the full catastrophe of the human condition, and often the way government is set up to not take care of the people that most need a hand up or a foundation. And you can see the government falling apart and losing its mind and going at each other's throats in the Congress just when we need some kind of clarity and unity, and we're not getting it. So you're getting more of it from, the New York governor and, but wherever it comes from, never sell yourself short. The world needs you. You are as much a part of the world as anybody else. And we need you to be who you really, really, really are. And if you're going to go through hard times, well, welcome to the club. Everybody goes through hard times. No one escapes from stress. And some people, it's true, some people are going to go through harder times than other people. But you know what? Sometimes the people who go through the hardest times and who have the least actually are not only in some ways the best adjusted and happiest, but they also actually are the most creative. And you can see that by going to some of the poorest places on earth, India. And it's kind of, you walk around in Old Delhi where people have nothing. They're living on 1 square foot of sidewalk. And you can just see that they look happier than most of the Western tourists who are desperately trying to have some kind of interesting experience. But, the most interesting experience is life itself.
So, Dakota, do you have any reaction to that?
Or what you're saying, Brian? I would totally underscore what you're saying, that you may need to make your own rituals. I mean, within your family or whatever it is in terms of graduation or in terms of college, but there's not going to be any stopping you. And the universities, the colleges, jobs, whatever it is that you want, they want you too. They're going to come back at a certain point. And the question is, what can be learned in the interim so that it's not wasted time? And there, you train just the way if we're a basketball player, you train. You don't just say, I want to be a Chicago Bull. You train and you train and you train. It's very tough. And that's what meditation is too. It's a kind of mind training to actually be your best self. And the beauty is, it's really life itself. So it's not something special that you have to go to the gym for. You can do it anywhere.
And Dakota she has a lot of leadership qualities. We know this in the high school. I personally am not worried about her at all. And she also has a bright future she wants to be an entrepreneur and she likes to cook. So she's very talented. And so is Tariq. Tariq is an 11th grader, right? He's stepping into the pole position next year to be a senior. Tariq, what questions do you have for Dr. Kabat-Zinn?
Just call me John. Never mind the doctor stuff.
Well, a question that I have in relation to being cooped up inside the house, how do I deal with the anxiety that comes with it?
Yeah, well, that's tough. I was saying during the guided meditation that, there are only moments. So the question is, how are you going to be in relationship to your moments? Now, a lot of the time, when you don't know what to do, you're bored, right? I mean, do you ever get bored? And in the house, if you can't go out, I mean, usually when you're bored, you go out, right? Get me out of here. But when you can't go out, you have to learn how to go out in a different way, enter into the kind of, vast expanse of your own mind. Or I don't know if you can ever go out. Do you go out and take walks, or can you do that, or go outside the building, or what's it like?
Every once in a while, of course, I'd go outside and take a walk because I can't just go outside get groceries and stuff. But that's kind of my taste of outside.
Yeah, but what would you like if you could just have it be any way you want at the moment? What are you missing most?
Just being able to see all my friends. That's kind of what's been like.
Yeah. And do you see them online? I mean, can you connect with them by phone or, stuff
Yeah,
like that?
we text, and majority of my friends we call and stuff. But it's like, I don't know like how to explain it, but it's like a different like feel, like to be actually around them and like.
Of course. I mean, look, I hung out on street corners forever when I was a kid. I mean, I don't know if you do that, but I mean, street corners were where it was at. We didn't have technology. We had to bang on each other's doors to find out if we were home. We couldn't text. But yeah, that's a loss. And I think part of what we're learning, what we're talking about is like, understand how much of a loss there is here. And at the same time, understand how you are in relationship can make a big can make a big difference into whether it's like horrible or whether it's just tolerable. And from that point of view, I would say, when you're feeling anxious, maybe that would be a good time to meditate and just see if the waves of your own reactivity in your mind can somehow calm down. And even if they don't, you're not trying to force the waves to calm down. That would be like trying to put a sheet of glass on the Hudson River and trying to make it not wave when it waves. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like folly to do that. But if you drop underneath the waves, it's gentle calmness. And that's the same in the mind. When your mind is anxious or stressed or, even frightened or in pain, if you drop underneath it in awareness and you just hold it there, I think you'll discover a very interesting thing is that you now have a kind of different vantage point or perch where you are somehow sheltered from the storms in your own mind. Are there storms in the mind? Absolutely. As long as you're human, there are going to be storms in the mind. And in a pandemic, when you're all cooped up and life isn't what you need it to be, then of course that's going to be a big part of your experience. But if you can also use this as a time to cultivate how to be in relationship to unwanted experiences when you can't control it and there's no one to blame, that's a huge skill that you can bring to the rest of your life. And one of the reasons I said that, they had pandemics in Shakespeare's time was because this has been going on throughout human history. We just haven't learned the history and we haven't learned enough lessons from it. But the fact is that people will get through this. And it's true, a lot of people won't. But the vast majority of people will. And the question is, are we going to learn any real lessons from this? And as I was saying, it's you young people that in some sense are the biggest hope for the planet and for humanity, because you have this opportunity to make the most out of a very, very bad situation and then let it catapult you into some kind of new way of being that will be healthy, creative, and satisfying in profound ways. And that may include, I would say has to include writing a lot of the social ills of the society that have to do with poverty, that have to do with racism, that have to do with injustices that are actually baked into our justice system. And you can read about it every day in the newspaper or see, and I don't have to tell you folks that, but that the laws themselves are structured to privilege the certain few, whether it's by skin color or whether it's by wealth or whatever. And the vast majority of us people, it's all talk democracy, but not so much democracy. And we need to reclaim that. And that's another sort of, I would say, hope that your generation is going to take care of it a hell of a lot better than the generations that have yet to, had a crack at it. I mean, and that's not to say that people haven't worked incredibly hard, like Barack Obama and, Martin Luther King and a whole bunch of other people who, basically devoted their lives and in some cases gave their lives so that we could get to this point, but we've got a lot further to go.
So, John, in some of what you're saying, I hear you going back to the theme again and again that there's like an inherent wisdom in people. So I have this mindful fitness class I've been teaching since 2014, where it's like a semester-long course. They go through it every day. It's not just meditating. There's a whole curriculum in school,
in the school.
finance high school.
Right.
Yeah. So it's scheduled into the day: social studies, science, mindful fitness. And what I've learned over the many years of doing this is that there is so much more wisdom in kids that is given credit to them for. So there's a poem from Rumi, and he talks about the two kinds of intelligence. One kind is the kind from the outside in. I'm going to teach you things and I'm going to give you knowledge. But the other is from the inside out. It's just the core of your essence, this wisdom that's kind of like timeless. And this is what you're talking about when you talk about mindfulness, right? Like as an educator, this is the core of learning. If you really look at what is learning, it's being aware of what's here and now, right in this present moment. And what's here and now is just this natural, brilliant intelligence that every one of these kids had the first day of school when they walked into kindergarten.
Exactly. And just if I could add to that, because I completely agree with it, it's not one intelligence. It's not even two intelligences. It's a whole range of intelligences. So you've got body intelligence, somatic intelligence. You've got thought intelligence or cognitive, conceptual intelligence. But then you've got emotional intelligence. Some people, like, they're really good at thinking and emotionally clueless. So we have to cultivate emotional intelligence. Then the kind of thing with your friends, interactive social intelligence. And then there's planetary intelligence, taking care of, like, you know, the neighborhood and the environment and so forth. So there are a whole range of different ways in which human beings, I would say, can be, but actually can discover that they already are geniuses. And that we always look at the medical patients that come into the hospital with things wrong with them, with all sorts of stress and pain and chronic illness. We look at them all as geniuses, as miraculous beings. And they were once children, and they once went to high school. And so, you know, all of you who are in high school now, if you don't recognize that in a certain way, you are a genius, you are a miraculous being. And you've got everything that you need to thread the needle of your own karmic trajectory into your place in this world. And as I said, that will be profoundly satisfying to you if you thread that needle and listen deeply to what the world is asking for from you. And at the same time, it will take care of you.
Years ago, John, you really emphasized this little meditation for younger people in their 20s, teens, maybe even 30s, asking the question, what is my job on the planet with a capital J? And just repeating this.
I can remember that.
Yeah, so this is probably a good thing for kids to be doing, right? They're constantly engaging in this inquiry, this question, what is my job with a capital J? And not expecting the answer to appear on the first ask. It may take 5 years.
Or after even 3 or 4 years. I mean, I did that for 10 years. And I think I said earlier that my definition of my job with a capital J would be, what would I love so much I'd pay to do it? And sometimes that's called sweat equity, where you start at the bottom, you start at the beginning, you do whatever you have to do in order to get a little money so that you can do this or study with that person or whatever, grow in some way or other. And you never know where that's going to wind up. So that's where trusting your own heart and your own love and your own intuition comes in. Nobody can tell you what you can't do.
Here's a little disclaimer. I remember years ago hearing you say these kinds of comments and thinking, look at this guy. He's getting paid to teach meditation, as if this is an option for the rest of us. And after decades of practicing, I find myself as the dean of mindfulness and restorative interventions. And I'm like, magic happens when you ask the question. It happens.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you want the world to be different, change the world. Who says you shouldn't? What do you think education is all about? Excuse me. Yeah, and nobody asked for this pandemic, but you know what? In spite of all of its horror, it's also teaching us something. It's teaching us something about the value of science and listening to science and doctors and epidemiologists and people who actually understand how you have to deal with a virus that humanity has never seen before, and how to deal with our own impatience to get out there and have to get back to work and everything else. And you're seeing this be played out on the daily news and the newspapers every single day, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. But that's where wisdom comes in. And wisdom is not something that is like old people with white hair. You have the wisdom already in a certain way. And it's something that, as Brian said, I mean, it's cultivatable over time, but it requires you in some way to at least entertain the possibility that when you ask the question, what is my job on the planet with a capital J, and you don't try to fill it with dime store answers, but it just becomes a question in the back of your mind. Over time, that question is going to start guiding you in very profound ways and making choices that everybody else will say, how could you do that? This is the stupidest choice you ever made. And then 20 or 30 years later, say, what a genius you were for making that choice.
But you walked away from a very prominent scientific career, right? And in order to follow mindfulness, let's be honest, it seemed a little crazy in the 1970s when you did this, right? It was not like, oh, this is a great decision.
Yeah, my thesis advisor at MIT was a Nobel laureate, and he thought I was out of my mind to be interested in yoga and meditation. I mean, that I was absolutely throwing away my entire priceless elite education. And then 20 years later, he asked me to teach him how to meditate. So, you know, and that was like, no one would have ever, I would never have believed that would have happened. So you don't know. And this is a very important part of it. You know, school is all about like learning. So do you think the most important things that you're going to learn in the curriculum are what you know, or what you have to know? But what's even more important than knowing is knowing when you don't know something. And you don't have to know everything. All you have to do is know how to find out. And some things you can find out by Googling them or studying or reading books. But other things, the only way you can find out is by looking inside and by settling in and not trying to get anywhere else, but allow yourself to be as you actually are. Since you brought up a poem, I mean, from Rumi, let me just sort of leave you with a poem by you know, that comes out of the Native American tradition, but was written by a professor of English at Washington University named David Wagner. It's called Lost. So a lot of the time, Tariq, you mentioned that you feel anxious, but I'm wondering, I mean, don't we all feel lost sometimes too? Like, what the hell is happening? Where am I going? And stuff like that. So this is a poem that the Native American elder from the Pacific Northwest in this, you know, sort of what is Oregon and Washington, you know, the native peoples there long ago, before there were any white people on this planet or on this continent. You know, the forests were so amazing that if you walked into old growth forest 20 or 30 feet and turned around 3 times, you would have no idea which way you would come from. And you could be completely lost. The forests covered all of North America. And so this poem is the advice of the elder to the young children when they ask, what do I do when I'm lost in the forest? And this is the elder speaking. And this is the poem. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. Listen, the forest whispers, the forest breathes, it whispers, I have made this place around you. If you leave, you may come back again saying, here. No two places are the same to raven. No two bushes are the same. No two places are the same to raven. No two bushes are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, in other words, the detail of what's actually in front of you in the present moment, then you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. Life knows where you are. You must let it find you. That's much, much bigger than the coronavirus. Okay? Life itself. And it's such a huge mystery that not even all the scientists, nobody knows what's really going on, which is scary, but it's also a tremendously creative opportunity, which is what school and being young is really all about, as far as I can see, even in the hardest of times.
You know, to your concerns, both Tariq and Dakota, I remember when I graduated college in the 1990s, and on graduation day, all of a sudden my heart started to beat really fast, and I didn't know what was going on with it. And I thought at the time I was having a heart attack, and I was getting very, very dizzy. And my mom is a nurse, and I said, well, I feel like I'm having a heart attack. And she said, just relax, just breathe, all of this. It turned out I was having my first ever panic attack, and I had no idea what it was. It lasted for 2 years, and it was 2 years of desperation, a little bit like what you're feeling, Tariq, and I had no idea what to do with this. What I didn't realize was underneath this, it was, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to make my mark? All of these questions that I didn't directly answer. Along the way, at the same point in time, by complete accident, there was a book in front of me, and the name of it was called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And when I read the first 3 pages, I was introduced to something called mindfulness, but I felt like I was looking at something that I had always known and forgotten. Now, I don't want to say that mindfulness was a miracle cure, but in tandem with mindfulness, the panic attacks went away. And I have not had a panic attack in 30 years or 25 years, whatever it is. So sometimes what I've learned is that these difficult moments in life can actually transform us in positive ways. So Jon, I want to thank you for writing that book, which changed completely the trajectory of my life. I appreciate that. I teach English and I teach Shakespeare and all of this. No book that I've ever taught, as much as I've enjoyed them, has ever changed my life. Yours did. Thank you, Jon.
Wow, I'm speechless and really grateful. And again, I mean, I'll just use that. I'll take that, Brian, really profoundly as a gift, what you're saying, and then turn it back, to the theme of our gathering and getting together. And that is like, when you find your own way and you find your own voice, then there's no telling who else is going to be touched by you being you. And writing books is just one way to be you, to express yourself. There are many, many different ways. Let me recommend a book to you by a friend of mine who just wrote this book called Stay Woke. I don't know if you can see it, but it's by a fellow named Justin Michael Williams, who is a rap artist and a very, very cool, human being from LA, who just wrote this book called A Meditation Guide for the Rest of Us is the subtitle. And I think you'll find that if you don't have to read the book. I mean, just find him on YouTube and check out his music. He's, really an example of a person who's found himself in a certain way that allows him to just be who he is, okay as he is, and different from everybody else, and then to make that difference into an asset rather than a liability, and then turn it into something that really has a lot of power to transform the world. And he was this book just came out, and he was about to go on a book tour. And usually when you go on a book tour, you go on a book tour to sell books. But he had arranged with the publisher to be able to go on a book tour and give the books away to high school kids.
Wow.
Give them away to high school kids. So then the virus happened, and he only went to one city instead of 10 because then you couldn't travel. So, you know, everybody's life is impacted by this virus in one way or another, and it's going to be over. So use this as a training period to come out of this even stronger and wiser and better and more you than when we went into it. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy or that there won't be a lot of hardship and a lot of tears and a lot of pulling our hair out. That's all part of the curriculum too, especially when you can hold that in awareness with kindness and generosity towards yourself. And that's, in my vocabulary, that's a love affair. That's a love affair with life. And that's what the meditation practice really is.
Jon, thank you so much for your time today. Tariq, Dakota, you guys keep keeping on. Reach out if you need anything. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your questions were great. Your help behind the scenes. Anything you want to say to Jon before we close off, guys?
No, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You made me look at things a lot more different than how I was looking at them before.
Well, I hope that someday our paths cross in person. You know that? And maybe sooner or later they will.
Well, will you stop by Food and Finance High School the next time you're in Manhattan and we're out of quarantine?
I tell you what, maybe I'll come to graduation when we have the real graduation.
We will hold you to that, Jon. So thank you so much.
This has been a future, but that's my impulse of the moment. I feel like, you know, again, have we met or have we not met? It's weird. All I'm seeing is faces on the screen, but somehow the you that's on the screen on my laptop connects in a certain way. So it's like we are in some sense meeting, and I really appreciate Brian, the opportunity for me to just connect with these two beautiful young people.
Hey, you're an alumni of the Department of Education. How could we deny you?
I never think of myself of the New York public school system. Yeah, I don't relate to it as the Department of Education, but at least in my
I don't either.
The New York public school system.
The New York public school system. Point well taken.
And I tell you, I not only am I an alumni, but I loved it. I mean, I had a very, very happy time in school in New York City, because New York City is its own kind of university. Growing up on the streets, which I did, was like the biggest, best school of all. School of life.
The school of life. And that's
but now, of course, you know, we can't even go out in the street in the same way and play with our friends. So there's no question that this sucks. And there's also no question that there's going to be a lot of other things in the world that suck as well. And we have to, in some sense, find ways to flow like water past the obstacles.
We had Jay Michelson on last week from 10% Happier, and that was one of the themes that he mentioned, the freedom of saying this sucks. Because it does.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that a lot of times the misconception, kids come to meditation and say, hey, listen, this is fake. I don't want to pretend to be happy. And it's like, hey, we're not trying to make you pretend to be anything. Let's just be honestly, sincerely with whatever is happening right now. Suckiness, greatness, whatever it is.
But a lot of people don't teach meditation that way. They teach it as a way to feel better or to get less stressed or whatever. And that's a big mistake, because it takes all the wind out of the sails.
Do you notice that when people teach meditation or mindfulness, or even when they lead systems, if they haven't developed it in themselves for 5, 10, many, many years, that it takes on a different kind of flavor? Have you noticed that?
Let's not even go there.
All right, but you've noticed this, right? Okay.
Of course, I mean.
So this is the kind of thing that if you want to be authentic in your own life, you have to actually put time in. You actually have to practice.
Well, otherwise you're just talking about rather than actually living the practice. If the practice isn't lived, then everything, when you open your mouth about it, is kind of contrived and artificial. But what I'm talking about is kind of non-dual orientation to practice, which is very radical because it's saying even for the Chicago Bulls or the Los Angeles Lakers, it's not about winning. It's not about getting to some special state or place where you ace out the competition. It's about being fully who you are and then trusting that the winning will take care of itself. And if you lose, sometimes there are lessons to be learned about why you lost.
We've learned a lot of lessons today, Jon. Thank you so much. So appreciate it. It's benefited me.
Brian, pleasure meeting you again like this. And
yeah, you as
if
well.
You can get, I don't know, this book I think would be kind of a real resource for a lot of your students. Actually, this book, Stay Woke. If there's a way to help them get a hold of it.
I will tell my principal. We will get on it. So maybe we can.
But I would say in the interim, just Google Justin Michael Williams and check out his music, because his music is about mindfulness. And it's, I don't even know, because I'm an old white guy, I don't even know what to call the music. I could say it's hip hop or I could say it's punk, but I don't really know what the hell he would call it. But it is very, very cool. And I've seen him perform in person, and it's he's worth checking out. That's all I'll say. And
I'll just say that Dakota was smiling from ear to ear as you just said all of that.
I saw that. Well, what can I do?
All right, guys. So, Jon, thank you so much to read.
We've gone over the hour. I hope that's okay from your point of view.
Oh my God, it's just this is gold. This is we're just loving it, and I can see that.
Well, it's my honor to meet you both, Tariq and Dakota. It's really my honor, and I know that you're not just there for yourselves. You're in some sense representing all your classmates, many of whom just couldn't be on the call in real time like this.
Right.
So I feel like. It's been a real honor for me to just connect back with my own roots in a certain way in the New York public schools.
And I appreciate the insight that you gave us.
Thank you. Well, the virus is not the only thing that's contagious. The love is also contagious. The insight is also contagious. The intention to be fully yourself is also contagious. So go for it. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone watching at home. This has just been a true blessing to have Jon Kabat-Zinn here. I'm just kind of speechless about it. Next week, we have a guest on. Her name is Nicole Sachs. She is an author, a licensed therapist, and she's the host of a podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain. She actually is going to talk about the connection between chronic physical conditions and emotional kind of mood states. And she has very practical tips for us. So that's next week. Till then, stay calm and connected. Take care, everyone.